lovely to see you.
And darling boy, what you've just done is what...
Richard Attenborough was a major force in the British film industry. He began his career as an actor, and after working in nearly 80 films, put his incredible energy into producing and directing. We interviewed him in 1992, 50 years after he got his acting break in the film In Which We Serve.
Print it, please.
I was put into a sailor's uniform, and through the doors at the end of this, what appeared to be this massive stage to me, suddenly the doors opened, in came Noel, ears flapping.
Keep it up! Stop star show! Stop star show!
And now came over to me and said, "You won't know me. My name's Noel Card, but of course you're Richard Attenborough, aren't you?" And I was 17. And here was this fantastic figure with this wonderful profile, you know. And I did a test for Noel. And got this part. I mean, if you blew your nose, you missed me, but it had a marvellous moment in the movie. Like on all occasions, you're tremendously nervous, you know. I mean, you really are. You are quaking, just as well you were wearing navy trousers because your knees didn't actually show that they were knocking. One of the reasons that I loved him was that he had a magic ability to deal with actors. Being an actor himself, he understood what actors required, how you placed them in a position of confidence and relaxation and so on.
Young actor Richard Attenborough has joined the RAF, photographing bombing raids over Germany. But that's not all. Dickie now stars in Journey Together, the RAF's tribute to our boys in the air. Well done, Dickie.
It mustn't be overstated, Melvin. I was really there at the very end of the European War, and really the 2 or 3 actual raids that I went on were, I mean, it was a sort of pushover. It was awful, really. There was virtually no opposition at all. But predecessors, people who really did that work, it was really rough. I met one of my great heroes. I met Edward G. Robinson. And the RAF flew him over from America to play a Canadian flying instructor.
Come on, David.
And I worshipped this man anyway. I mean, I've seen the sort of things, Little Caesar and so on, things that he'd done at that time. He said that he thought that acting for the cinema at its best was more difficult to accomplish than acting in the theatre.
There's nothing wrong with your nerve. Good. No, it's not good at all. I thought your trouble was underconfidence.
I mean, acting to a large extent is concentration. It is bringing the absolute truth and reality of a particular circumstance to bear on anything and everything that you are attempting to portray at a particular moment. Circumstance, emotion, thought, whatever. What Eddie Robinson said was that whereas in the theatre you could, on a bad matinee, be thinking about tomorrow's lunch, you could not do that in the cinema. And if you were to really reach the heights in cinema, your actor's concentration had to be absolute.
He was ahead of his period by quite a long way, I think. That he was interested in the, for want of better description, the psychology of parts, you know, rather than just sort of actorial look at things, you know, which was, I mean, those are the periods, in a sense. That was the period in which most actors would consider film to be just money, you know, on the side. Well, that's gravy, you know. But the real work is in the theatre. And I think Richard's one of the first people to understand that the real work for him was in film.
Now, come on, lady, try your skill. Don't be afraid, don't be bashful.
Time on you, Bill.
You can see the clock, can't you? Don't stand for phony alibis, see?
That's all right, Bill. I only wanted to know.
One of your early roles which brought you a great deal of acclaim and attention, and quite rightly, it's a wonderful film, was the part of Pinky in Brighton Rock. Graham Greene, who later sent you a marvellous note about Pinky, thought when you were cast on the stage version that you hadn't the necessary evil. I think that was his phrase.
Graham Greene to whom I was devoted, was absolutely right, that in the theatre, I couldn't find the depth and truth of it.
Run up this way, walk up.
I don't believe that I actually, at that time, understood how difficult it was and the extent of the concentration that was required in order to reach that point, whereas I think in some measure I reached it in the movie.
You saw his photograph?
Yes, but it wasn't him. That's what I don't understand.
People look different in photographs.
But it wasn't him. I've got a memory for faces.
Richard Attenborough, Lord Attenborough, or Dickie as most people knew him, is a strange mixture. At one end, he was an archetypal, almost caricature lovey. Everybody was called darling. Partly, he later said, because he couldn't remember most people's names, but I think he liked to call people darling. He was prone to, almost expected to, burst into tears when he won awards, which he did. 8 Oscars for Gandhi and awards for all sorts of other things. So there's a lovey element, which served him well. He was quite shrewd about that. The first film he directed was Oh, What a Lovely War, which is a huge task for a man who hasn't directed a film before. Joan Littlewood had made a sensation of it in her theatre in the East End, and to turn that into a film, such a theatrical piece, not being Joan Littlewood, by a long way, what's he going to do? Well, first of all, he employed one of his many weapons, which is he lied.
I went to see the head of Paramount, and he said, Dickie, who can you get to be in it? So I lied through my teeth. I mean, I lied. I said, oh, Olivier Richardson, Gielgud, Redgrave, Vanessa Redgrave, Kenny Moore, Johnny Mills, Jack Hawkins, etc., Maggie Smith. He said, you get me 5 of those, and you have the money. Well, I went to see Larry Olivier. And he said, absolutely, you must do it. And absolutely, I will play in it. And I don't care. I don't need to see a script. You can say I'll play in it. I'll just walk across the screen. I don't mind what I do, if that will help. I said. And so after a deal of chat and so on, and I was going, and he said, and Dick, tell Ralphie and Johnny that I'll do it for scale. And that's how I got the cast. I was able to say that Laurence Olivier was prepared to do it for a nominal sum. 80–90% of making movies is energy, is determination, is absolute commitment and passion to do it. Because you've got to find a strength, which is, I mean, you do work phenomenally hard, particularly if you produce and direct. I mean, you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you don't get to bed before midnight, and that's 7 days a week, you know, for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And if you haven't got that absolute commitment to do it, you just can't make it.
Don't drink, lads.
Oh, What a Lovely War was a brilliantly original satire, sending up the political and military leaders behind the carnage of World War I.
Enemy in front.
8 years later, Attenborough made another war film that attacked military strategy, A Bridge Too Far.
The action sequences stand up extremely well. Can you give us some clues what you went for in these sequences?
Extras are extras, and I've worked with them for many, many years in many, many movies. But they are extras. Why should they be soldiers? They're not. They perform as best they can, as best they may, but they are not military men, as it were. And it seemed to me that if we were going to stage these battle sequences, there was no way, if we were going for those ad-lib shots, where you could have somebody who couldn't, in fact, handle a rifle, who couldn't, in fact, move as a soldier would move under fire and so on. And so we assembled a group of young actors. I think there were about 40 or 50 of them. I don't remember the exact number. That may be more than there actually were. And we, for 3 weeks, drilled them. We got 2 sergeant majors and a couple of corporals from the army, and they drilled these young men, and they lived in a barracks, and they operated as a platoon in the army. And they were known as APA. They were known as Attenborough's Private Army.
Get moving.
I suppose the sternness, slight sternness on this portrait of your father and your mother is the period sternness, but were they a little bit stern anyway?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, oh, yes, no. Father was very stern and could be extremely stern and was very authoritarian. And the only thing you had to do, I mean, the only problem was that he had this tremendous sense of humour. And if you could make him laugh when you were in high trouble, then you got out of difficulties. And that was, in fact, what Dick was very good at doing. I mean, making him laugh all the time.
They were an utterly remarkable couple. They both came from academic backgrounds. My father from a very poor background indeed. He was the son of the local village baker. He was a principal of a university college in Leicester. My father was not a founder member of the Labour Party, but a very, very early member of the Labour Party. My mother was in some degree involved in the suffragette movement. They didn't pay lip service to anything. And they believed passionately that if you had a conviction or if you witness particular circumstances, it was no use whatsoever offering sympathy. What you had to do was to do something about it.
Dick's reports, I have to say, perhaps
Dave,
you've said already.
Dave,
but anyway.
I haven't, Dave, and I wasn't going to.
Were terrible.
No, I didn't say they were terrible, Dave.
And
I was saying a little below your standard.
The routine would be that you actually had to take your report and give it to Father, who was sitting at his desk, who would then open it and read it in your presence.
I was a disappointment to my father, whereas Dave, of course, was not. As I say, the academic background, he would love me to have gone to university. He wanted me, desperately wanted me to go to university. But certainly my failure in academic matters, I mean, they've talked about school reports and so on. I really had a very miserable time in that regard. I loved school to the extent that it did involve the Amateur Drama Society and that sort of thing. But until the RADA scholarship happened, I was a hell of a disappointment to the governor, and he found it very difficult indeed to hide those feelings. So to that extent, as Dave said, it was a stern household, but it was full of laughter too. It was full of joy.
You're taking a handful of salt and bringing it up.
The bad school reports didn't keep Richard Attenborough from formidable achievements later on, one of which was the epic 1982 film Gandhi.
457, take 1A camera only.
It took Attenborough 20 years to raise the money.
I could not get any major company to back me. I mean, I think I've probably told, when you and I have been talking on other occasions, the story of the terrifying character I went in to see, who was the head of Fox at that time. I attempted to convince this man of the wonderful story that there was to tell, a cinematic story that there was to tell. And I spent, I don't know, too long, I suppose, 20 minutes, half an hour, telling him what I thought were the vital question. And he said, look, he said, who the hell do you think's interested in a little brown man dressed in a sheet carrying a beanpole? And that was Gandhi to him. I mean, that was it. And that was the attitude towards the movie in Los Angeles.
Who the hell is he? I don't know, sir.
My name is Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi.
Well, whoever you are, we don't want you here. I suggest you get back on that train before it leaves.
They seem to want me.
There was nobody else who was actually prepared to single-handedly get something to the size of an American film coming out of this country. And he seemed to be doing it one time after another. I can remember when he offered me Gandhi, and I met him in a l'Orangerie in LA, and then he dropped this bombshell on me that he wanted me to play Gandhi, and I thought, oh my God, how can I possibly do that? I can't do that. I mean, it's very flattering. My God, it's flattering. But I'm as Caucasian as you can come, and this is a god in India, and I knew that, and it was... Anyway, we did do the makeup test when I got back, cut a long story short. And then we saw each other for the rushes the next day at Shepperton, and we looked at each other when we saw them. I looked like a Welsh rugby football player in a nappy, you know. And I said, I don't think that's a good. He said, no, I don't think it is, Johnny, darling, I don't know, and so on, you know. The reason that he did that, I don't think for a second that he ever thought that I was going to be playing Gandhi.
Really? So
but I think that he'd been asked, he said they'd been told that he'd got to test an English star in order to get the English money. I think it was...
So you were used, John Hill?
I was, but I mean, look, as Quentin Crisp says, a lot of people are never used.
We'll go. Long live! Long live! Long live!
In the end, the actor Ben Kingsley got the part of Gandhi. It was his first film role, and he won an Oscar for his performance.
Have you heard the news? Well, we won 8. Bleeding hell, 8!
One of the joys that I had, which is mean-minded, is that all those buggers who turned me down, you know, and said, no, 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 we don't want to know about financing Gandhi, nobody will go and see it, how ridiculous, etc. When the picture was finished, my wonderful agent, Marty Baum, got all the heads of all the studios to see the picture, and every single one of them bid for it. And I sat with the most disgraceful grin from ear to ear, watching these chaps who'd all derided it, you know, bidding up and bidding up and bidding up for the right to distribute it.
Film director. In the meantime,
I'd known him on and off for a long time, through Labour Party, through mutual friends and so on. And again, there was this contrast, really. He lived in this extremely grand house on Richmond Green, had this wonderful Rolls Royce and half an island in Scotland, house in the south of France, and he liked that glamorous life that actors in the 30s and 40s, or great actors or successful actors, longed for, aspired to, and he got it all. But when you got in there, he was very nervy, tentative. Did we do this, darling? Sure, hello, how's the cat? And he was determined to put himself over very well. Why shouldn't he? So he was a rather complex figure to interview. When you got going, he would warm to you, and then it would be fine, and then he would realise what the game was. And when the game was afoot, he played it very well. But you also had to watch your step with Dickie. He looked benevolent. He was benevolent. But inside there was a very complicated man who knew exactly what he wanted. The steel behind the smile was always there.
What are we waiting for, David? Come on, answer me, darling. Just answer me, sweetheart. Don't complain all the time. Just tell me, darling. Well, just tell me what the matter is.
I'm going to use that camera over here.
I see.
But they say now they can't because it's all changed.
Because it's...
Because it's been changed.
What's been changed?
All the accent's been changed. They say,
No? Nothing's been changed.
So do you want to use that camera?
Absolutely, if you want it over here. I like being in charge, you see, I'm afraid. I like having my way. I adore the medium in which I work. I get up every morning and, as Orson says, you know, that train set, I mean, I can play with it all day. I'm in seventh heaven when I'm involved in all the aspects of movies. Right, hold it a second.
And it seems to me that if I derive that degree of satisfaction without in any sense being sanctimonious, it is obligatory almost that I put something back in.
Alongside his film career, Richard Attenborough was a tireless supporter of various charities.
It's the largest cheque I've ever seen.
He sat on countless boards and was active in the Labour Party. What do you feel about being a member of the establishment? What do you feel about being up there, always available to be shot at as one of the great and the good? Does that bother you?
Yes. I'm ridiculed. I mean, I accept it. I mean, I don't mind people mocking the fact that I can't control my emotions and that I'm in floods of tears. You know, if something moves me deeply, I don't mind about that. I'm quite prepared to laugh at that myself. But I do get thrown to the extent that people do denigrate what I do in certain areas on the basis that I'm there because I wish to be seen to be socially conscious, or whatever terrible phrase they want to use. And it's much less complicated than that. It's in fact very simple. I do what I enjoy doing, and very often that enjoyment comes from doing it because I think I ought to do it.